In the late 19th century, people headed westward in exploration, hoping to get their grub stake in the mines of Utah, to hunt down their gold in the vast expanses of the Sierra Nevadas, to grab the land on the Great Plains while it was cheap, to embark on a religious journey to a promised land of salt lakes and canyons. My plan was to head eastward, to what they abandoned, to explore the remnants of the past. Leading up to my trip, I spent a lot of time looking through books and websites on the topic of ghost towns. Many of these abandoned sites were very much intact. Many abandoned homes were still erect, just the way they were when they were left. Sometimes the book included more intimate details about the remains. For some ghost towns, all that remained were rubble, old cans, and trash. The century-old untouched artifacts of a once living town would still be sitting on the ground under the sun, waiting to be looked at. I read this as I sipped from a Pepsi soda can and my eyes squinted from the glare of my computer screen illuminating my face in an otherwise dark room. I longed to be away from the soulless hum of the electricity in the walls and the harsh sounds of honking sports cars at all hours of the morning. In preparation for the trip, I packed a few cameras, a 4-megapixel digital camera, an Optura 60 digital video camcorder, a Kodak black and white disposable camera, and then a portable Advantix camera. I also brought a few items of clothing, no CDs, no books. My father, who is 83, remembers the 1920s, a time when many of these ghost towns were still inhabited, and he often fondly recounts amusing events from life on the farm during the Dust Bowl years in Kansas. I called him the night before I left on my trip, and he told me that he once knew people who were alive during the Civil War. His eyes actually met their eyes. He could have asked them any question he wanted about life in the mid-19th century, and they would have answered from personal experience. He can remember an era that I can only fantasize about. He could have talked to people whose lives are completely lost to me. And now I could ask him what they would say and how they would say it. I told him that it seems strange to me that he can remember so far back. He said it seems strange to him too. His memory isn't enough to bring back the experience of the 1920s. There are bits of information that will never be recovered, like which pair of pants was his favorite to wear to school, and exactly how many nickels he could buy a burger for. And I also wonder at what moment it stopped seeming normal for him to travel by stagecoach. I look at images of my father's family on the farm. I realize how little I know about these young, squinting strangers standing by the silo, who are now my beloved aunts and uncles in wheelchairs or using canes, stuck with respirators, or dead from lung cancer or prostate cancer or liver failure. 3 men stand in a field. An awkward space separates them. One of them smiles slightly. To me, his pants are really high on him. His eyes are closed, not on purpose. Perhaps the photographer didn't give him enough time to prepare for that photo to be taken. He did not freeze himself to a pose for that moment. He did not stall his life for a few seconds to let one glimpse live beyond him. It was caught against his knowing. My father used to tell me how he would have to sit still for several minutes for a photo to be taken. He remembered once when a bee landed on another boy's head, and that boy ended up blurry in the photo. I wonder if he thought about bees every time his photo was taken. I wonder if he still thinks about bees every time someone says, cheese. In a struggle to understand my history and origins, I usually look at his family's photos and then my own life in photos. I have already reorganized all these photos chronologically in photo albums and in terms of my own life, and there might never be a right way to order so many disparate photos. I worry that I might have placed a photo of my father at age 40 next to one of him from the 70s, and I never would have known that it was wrong. It's like walking through a cemetery and wondering if any of the people buried next to each other would have liked each other, and if not, would they object to being buried where they were? At least I know that it was my father, even if I didn't know him through the first 3/4 of his life, or know what it might have been like to have had a regular-aged father. I turn the pages of the photo album further, and I see a blond boy with long curly locks of hair. I want to ask him his age. I'm sure he would have answered by holding up an amount of fingers. He's on a rocking horse. Later that horse would be sold for 3/4 at a garage sale, and that boy would remember that horse, although not completely, and one day that boy would be looking at this image of that horse and wonder where it came from and why it was so ugly, or what it must have been like to have been that small and climbing on it. It's too bad the boy's eyes could not actually see back at mine when I look at his photo. I look at the photo and think about the nature of a one-way mirror. I was talking to Alex recently about nostalgia. He said nostalgia was virtually non-existent before the 20th century. It was only acknowledged as a disorder, like a general melancholy, since that's what resulted from it. Now Alex lives on a different continent and spends time with people I've never met and maybe wouldn't want to. But like a one-way mirror, I can only see the way things used to be when I flip forward in my photo books and see that little boy as a young man. I can see when he met this other boy, Alex, and I know from these photos that they must have been really happy with each other at one time. It was a wide, beautiful valley, strange rock formations, abandoned mines, century-old materials for excavating and sifting through dirt for gold, big wooden structures, and large holes that I could not see the bottom of. I took Polaroids of myself in that ghost town, and I left them there to be found. If someone were to find one of those photos, they would see a remnant of the past. It would become the object of their nostalgia. I would haunt them. Maybe they would find the photo on an old brick wall, and then in the photo they would see me sitting on that very same brick wall. That would be nostalgic. That moment, whenever it was that I was there, that memory of the past would be waiting for them to be found. I came to that ghost town, hoping to get all of this nostalgia out of me. I guess by becoming it. Whenever that was, when I went to that town, I wanted to feel the way it felt when they lived in that town. I wanted to know how they felt nostalgia. Whenever that was.